The global rulebook is falling apart, and today we live in an age where the pursuit of national advantage seems to reign supreme.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
Alliances are buckling as countries pursue national interest and increasingly resort to threats or the actual use of force. But for decades, Western countries convinced themselves that they were better because they stood up for the rules-based order. When the Cold War ended, progressive leaders like Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, both lawyers by training, tried to reinforce that idea with new treaties. But during the past 20 years, countries like China and Russia have challenged the idea, and leaders like Donald Trump have found political gold in tearing up the rulebook entirely. So what even is the international rules-based order? Why did we get it in the first place? And what's going to happen now that key countries like the US, Russia, China and India are pursuing their national interests so ruthlessly? And does obeying international law now make you look principled or just naive? So what is the rules-based order? It started as a promise by the victorious Allies in the Second World War that the carnage of the 1940s should never be allowed to happen again.
And there's hope that history will not this time repeat itself.
The foundation of the rules-based order was the creation of the United Nations and the principles enshrined in its charter. The signatories agreed never to resolve territorial disputes again by the use of force. It also gave the wartime allies extra powers to preserve the peace. The UN could authorize all necessary means, even war, if international security was threatened, though those powers have only been used 3 times. In Korea in 1950, in 1991 to evict Iraq from Kuwait, and in 2011 against Libya. And there was more. The General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs was established to promote free trade and fight protectionism, the kind of economic nationalism that had helped fuel the run-up to war. These international arrangements weren't perfect, but they did help to constrain rivalries during the Cold War. And once that had ended, in a spirit of optimism, democratic leaders tried to extend the reach of international law. In the 90s, the creation of the World Trade Organization, the International Criminal Court, the Kyoto Climate Change Agreement, and the landmine ban all encouraged that belief.
We are witnessing the beginnings of a new doctrine of international community. By this I mean the explicit recognition that today more than ever before, we are mutually dependent, that national interest is to a significant extent governed by international collaboration.
But was this overreach by the progressives? Russia and China started to get vocal, saying the United States was trying to define global rules, but then breaking them at will, for example, after 9/11. In 2007, Vladimir Putin told the world that Russia would no longer go along with it.
Прежде всего, конечно, Соединенных Штатов, перешагнула свои национальные границы и, по сути, во всех сферах, и в экономике, и в политике, и в гуманитарной сфере навязывается другим государствам. Ну, кому это понравится? Кому это понравится?
Russia began to act more aggressively, waging war on Georgia in 2008 and Ukraine from 2014. If there was a moment when the UN Charter, which prohibits land grabs, became a dead letter, then this was it. This was a European war of conquest launched by one of the key UN powers that was meant to uphold the peace. And just as the global security order began to crack, so the unravelling spread to trade policy and even climate change.
I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world.
Russia started the trend of putting its own security interests first. But now Trump has torn up the international trade rulebook.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world.
And if you think it's just dictators and their populist admirers that are doing this, think again. These days, Europe's proud democracies still talk the talk about upholding the rules, but use all their ingenuity to bend them. A decade ago, the migration crisis supercharged populism across the continent. As a result, the EU's regulations on asylum are often flouted, and today 9 of the 29 members of the Schengen Agreement on Free Movement have suspended it temporarily in order to introduce border checks under so-called emergency measures. Even the rulings of the International Criminal Court, one of the crown jewels of that 90s idealism, are now treated as optional homework. France and Germany, for example, have signed the treaty and are therefore supposed to act on its indictments.
The decision of the court has to be respected and implemented. So I take note of the decision of the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants from Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yet both countries have said that they wouldn't arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, and indeed allowed his jet to go through their airspace. Ukraine, finding itself in mortal danger, has walked away from the landmine treaty that it signed during happier times. And its neighbours, Poland, Finland and the Baltic republics, have followed suit. Britain is sticking with that treaty. But is that high principle or just the luxury of being further away from Russia? So can following the rules still pay dividends in global diplomacy?
Thank you very much. So we have good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe.
We've recently seen the European Union pressured into an unequal trade deal with America.
I think you were saying this is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
It is.
Now it appears that power politics reigns supreme and diplomacy is just about putting a brave face on that. Look at China's behaviour. It's a rising superpower that will help shape the 21st century. Yet, in the South China Sea, it ignores an international legal ruling that it lost and uses force to try and bully its neighbours into acquiescence. But amidst all this lawlessness, you have Britain, ready to honour an international ruling over the Chagos Islands, even at the cost of billions to itself.
The base is one of the most significant contributions that we make to our security relationship with the United States.
So does doing the honourable thing boost the UK's soft power or mark us out as suckers? A bit of both, perhaps. In this world, then, in which the pursuit of national advantage now seems to reign supreme, my advice to diplomats: cultivate those alliances. Don't stick your neck out with positions you can't back up, and express your foreign policy in terms of national history.